Today on Habits and Money, we are going to be looking at leadership processes and systems in the context of wealth creation and also in the context of business success processes. I promise you that today's presentation is going to be pretty interesting because we're going to be doing a deep dive into success models, and also we're going to be looking at wealth building systems. They say that success leaves clues. So what are those clues that can really position you for success? Today we will be looking at some of that. Now, joining me today in studio is no other than Tony. Now, Tony Raghunandan, he is a specialist when it comes to emotional intelligence, and he's a specialist in terms of performance management. Now, both of these concepts, both performance management and emotional intelligence, they are essential processes, they are essential leadership tools that one needs to understand when you're positioning yourself or attempting to position yourself for success. Tony, I must say it's great to have you here today. How are you?
Yes, Gary. Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. So before we get started, I just want to take some time to acknowledge over 40,000 subscribers who have joined our platform over the last 4 to 5 months. I want to thank you for subscribing to this program. And for those who are viewing the program but you have not yet subscribed, I want you to encourage you to subscribe now so you will be the first to get these content that we are bringing to you on a regular basis. I want to thank those who are with us live currently as we do that deep dive into today's platform. Now, to get the conversation rolling, I want to talk about the pathways to build wealth. Do you know why the rich get wealthy? They say success leaves clues. Are you aware of those clues that the wealthy use to position themselves for success? Well, today I'm going to give you a step by step approach to really help you to understand some of those clues. For example, what I've learned is that to be wealthy begins by first having a rich state of mind. But what exactly does it mean to have a rich state of mind? Let me break this down so you have this understanding moving forward. A rich state of mind is influenced by leadership, process, and systems. I want to further break this down. And let me repeat this. A rich state of mind is influenced by leadership, process, and systems. Now, what exactly do I mean by the term leadership? Now, if you want to position yourself to build wealth, in this context, the leader does three things. The proactive leader does three things. They are trained to think ahead, they are trained to see beyond problems, and they're also trained to take informed action to achieve desired results. And these are some of the clues that you need to understand. The process of thinking ahead, the process of applying proactive leadership. Now, what are some of those things that you want to be thinking ahead about? It's important for you to think ahead of the project that you're actually going to be implementing to position yourself to build wealth. It's absolutely necessary. All right. I just want to pause a little bit. I see that we have 112 persons who are currently viewing this program, and I want to say a big shout out to you and great to have you here. Today, we are looking at leadership processes and systems that is relevant to positioning you to have a successful business and also to position you to build wealth, to create wealth. I begin by saying that wealthy people, rich people, begins first of all with that state of mind. That state of mind that really helps you to understand what is leadership. That state of mind helps you to understand processes, and that state of mind helps you to understand systems. Now, let me go back at this. What the facts are showing is that wealthy people, they understand financial instruments. And understanding financial instrument is going to be a key component of positioning yourself to build wealth. Now, let us go a little deeper into what financial instrument means. In the financial world, there are multiple financial instruments. There are instruments like debt capital, there's equity capital, there's creative financing, and there's hard money lending. If you want to position yourself to build wealth and start thinking like wealthy people, it makes a lot of sense to apply your leadership skills to understand the process of money, how money works. All right. So it's necessary for you to understand. The clues are saying that wealthy people are best positioned in this place because they take the time to understand money and how money works. Now, it's not enough to understand financial instruments. It is good enough to know that financial instrument exist, but it's equally important to take the time to understand how to access capital markets. It is your ability to access capital markets that is going to help you to make a major difference on your pathway to want to build wealth. Now, it's your ability to access capital which will enable you to take that capital and invest it into income producing asset. Now, all of these things are leadership skills that you need to learn, that you need to apply, and that you need to master. Now, we have developed a very unique program that we call Pathway 5. And what Pathway 5, it helps you to understand what we call the science, the theory, and practice of wealth creation. In this program, we go deep into concepts like the pathway to, preparation, how to really prepare yourself for success. And as we go deep into this belly of knowledge, it really helps you to understand what wealthy people do. And the aim in today's program is to provide you with that content of information. So just let me recap before I hand over to Tony, and Tony will talk about performance management, and he will also talk about emotional intelligence. Now, if you want to position yourself to start building wealth, it makes sense to take some time to understand money and how money works. All right. So it's important to take the time to understand what is debt financing, what is equity financing, what is credit financing, what is hard money lending. There are many persons today that is not fully aware of these multiple type of financial instruments. Now, if you don't understand this, it's why you're going to struggle when it comes to helping your business to access capital and putting yourself in that position of strength to access capital to then leverage it into income producing asset that can set you up to start building wealth. Tony, I would now want to welcome you to chime in on the topic. I would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of performance management and the importance of emotional intelligence in the context of business and the context of wealth creation. All to you, my friend.
Thank you, Gary, and hello, everyone. So I'm going to shift focus a bit onto people right now. So because that is my focus. So I listened to a quote I read a quote by Simon Sinek the other day. He said, if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. And that is a very true statement because many businesses need people to function at their very best. Now, performance management is really managing the employee from the beginning to the end of their life cycle. It involves conversations, it involves relationships, it involves frameworks. And in order for it to work well, you need emotionally intelligent leaders, generally. So one of the things that I work with companies to try to create is to try to get a culture that they want. And that starts with having core values that filters down from your mission and vision. And core values is really about beliefs that everybody must share, internal beliefs. But in order for us to represent that, in order for us to represent our internal beliefs, we have to define core behaviors that you need for that to happen. Of course, it involves skills, knowledge, and behaviors that make up the competencies. So what is going to happen is companies generally are going to have to create a competency framework in order for this to work. What that competency framework does is it gives us an idea of the type of behaviors and goals that we need to go after. But it doesn't end there. When you have a set of core competencies, we use these core competencies to not only hire, but we want to make sure we demonstrate those behaviors so that the values could be demonstrated the way that we promise our customers to deliver it. Does that make sense, Gary? So far. Gary?
Yes, Peter. Yes, Peter, it makes, Tony, it makes a whole lot of sense. A whole lot of sense. I do believe that, you know, if you don't understand the ideal client, you really don't have a business, because the whole essence of starting a business is to be able to innovate products and services that reaches the expectations of the ideal client. You're not doing this for you. You're doing it to satisfy the needs, wants, and expectation of the consumer. So great points. Back to you, Tony.
Right. So when I mention emotional intelligence, we have to understand that everybody within a company, we have to operate. We have to achieve goals. We have to behave in certain ways. We have to interact with other people. And this is where the emotional intelligence aspect of it comes in. Now, emotional intelligence itself is broken into 4 distinct components. First component is self-awareness. This is the most important part of emotional intelligence because it drives all of the other components. In other words, it drives how we manage ourselves, how we manage our emotions. It drives our understanding of other people, which is social awareness. And understanding people is not just about different communication styles, different personalities. It also includes understanding genders, understanding intercultural information on how we are different. And then it also drives relationship management, which is the 4th component of emotional intelligence. Now, the idea is that, but what is, let's first talk about a definition of emotional intelligence. I know I gave you the 4 components already. But emotional intelligence involves how we manage, recognize, and manage our own emotions, and how we not control, but manage the emotions of other people. And that helps us to develop better relationships, which is what we need within our workplace. And that helps with the performance management aspect of it. So it's important that we take all of these things into consideration. I know it's a mouthful, but the idea is that we take a stepwise process to make sure that we have things defined so that we could have conversations throughout the financial year to see not only how people are performing, but how they are doing generally, personally, so that we form better relationships, so that there's an element of psychological safety within the environments that we work in, so that people are allowed to give their opinion, so that leaders can develop good relationships with their employees as well. Okay, over to you, Gary.
Thanks, Tony, for that share. You've made a number of very strong points in terms of emotional intelligence. And I think today, in today's corporate world, in today's life, it is so important to really pause a bit and really ask yourself the importance of emotional intelligence in the equation of wealth creation and in the equation of managing the business. Now, what I've learned is that when you manage your business in an emotionally sensitive manner, this is what literally creates the environment where your team and workforce feel highly motivated. And because your team and workforce are feeling highly motivated, they are producing more, all right? They have a workforce that is more conducive for work. But beyond all of this, they are now able to communicate that sense of joy, happiness, and excitement for the work that they are doing to the ideal client, to the customers. And that is the spillover of the emotional intelligence, which I believe has tremendous impact on the organization in itself, because happy staff is better positioned to nurture highly motivated consumers, and highly motivated consumers are better spender. The increase in spending that you're going to have, that's literally what's going to help the organization to grow. So I see the importance of what you're saying in terms of how it really aligns to driving the organization forward. So while this may be somewhat divorced from the whole, or some divorced from the process of wealth creation, they're all aligned. So I like the concepts that you would have shared, Tony. What I want to do, I just want to come right back to some of what I was saying, and then we'll come back to emotional intelligence and performance management. As one sets oneself up to build wealth, whether you are starting a business and attempting to scale a business, or you are getting into passive investment portfolio or investment portfolios, it makes a whole lot of sense to understand how the access to capital part plays in this whole equation. One of the things that we have seen is that many persons starts a business because you have great financial aspirations, and there's nothing wrong with that. You start a business because you want to grow and scale that business, but very often to grow and scale that business, you need access to a couple of things. You need access to the right human resources, you need access to technical resources, and you need access to capital resources. And what we have seen is that once you get access to capital, you can fill the human resource gap and you can fill the technical resource gaps. But what we are also seeing is that many persons, they struggle to access capital to grow and to scale the vision. And that is why on this platform, we spend so much of time trying to help people to understand what is smart capital access. Now, I want to spend some time just looking at this. In business, you want to position yourself to be the type of leader that we call the proactive leader. Because the proactive leaders, they do three things. They think ahead, they see beyond the problems, and they take informed action to achieve the desired results. Now, if you learn this and master this and apply yourself well at this, it will literally open up that pathway to help you build wealth. As a rising star in business, one of the things that you want to think about long before you start that business is to understand capital markets, is to understand how to access capital markets, is to understand how to leverage capital markets, and is to understand how to mitigate financial market. Having this body of knowledge is going to set you up to win in business, and it's going to set you up to win in life. But it requires a certain leadership mindset, a certain leadership skill set, and those tools you need to have. So I'm going to recap some of what we have been doing with the research. We asked the question at the beginning, do you know how rich people get wealthy? And I want to recap a couple of things. Well, rich people becomes wealthy because, first of all, they have a state of mind. But what does that state of mind represent? I want to repeat this because I want the audience to get it. A rich state of mind is influenced by leadership, processes, and system. And that's what I'm discussing here today. But I want to go a little further here. A rich state of mind is also influenced by science. It is influenced by proven theory, and it is influenced by best practices. Let me go one step further here. A rich state of mind is also influenced by being market oriented, by being market sensitive, and by being market responsive. Let me try to deal with the last part. You start a business and you want to cash flow optimize that business. But what we have seen is that in starting that business, you have made an emotional decision. without the intelligence. We're going to come back to that totally. What am I saying here? You start the business because you have an assumption that you're going to cash flow that business. But in starting and scaling a business and wanting to position that business to build wealth, you should not be making emotional decisions. You should not be responding without the intelligence. Now, let me go through this. I said a rich state of mind is influenced by market orientation, market sensitivity, and market responsiveness. And let me try to break this down a little bit. Research is showing that businesses that become successful and become the top 100 companies, the top 500 companies, they become successful. Why? Because they are market oriented. To be market oriented means that you're collecting information, sensitive information about your ideal client. And because you're now collecting sensitive information about the ideal client, you have a better understanding of what are their needs, their wants, and their expectations, because you're collecting that information and you're analyzing that information. And because you have this database, you as a rising star in business, you are best positioned or best placed to now innovate products and services, largely because you have the data that said, this is the ideal client, these are their wants, these are their expectations, so I can now innovate products and services to reach those expectations. It is the ability to do this is now should be the springboard for you to respond to the market needs. Don't respond to market needs unless you, one, is market oriented, because by being market oriented, you can now be market sensitive in how you go about innovating and creating products or services for the ideal client. So wealthy people understand this. Successful people in business understand this. And if you want to be successful in business, if you want to be successful in the wealth building process, you need to start positioning yourself to really understand how to apply this leadership process to positioning the business to be successful. Again, I want to pause and I want to say hello and a big shout out to all of those persons who are lighting up the chat. I see that we have Annette, we have Arthur, we have Oliver Rex, we have Ariel. We have over 114 persons who are here with us today, and I want to say a big shout out to you today. And I want to thank you from the depths of my heart for showing up and supporting this platform. Tony, I want to turn over to you so you could expand on some of what you were saying early on.
Right. I know, Gary, you talk a lot about business and the financial area, the financial aspect of it. Now, in order for those things to work well, we need to focus, again, shifting gears to people. And with people, what I mentioned earlier about aligning our competencies and behaviors to our values, that has to happen in order for the customers to have the kind of experience that you are promising. Now, a lot of leaders, and when we think about leadership skills, there are two things that we have to think about. What leaders have to do with their people and what they have to be as well. Now, being is a behavior. It is something that we have to have within any organization in order for companies to run. Why is that important? Because leaders create the environment that employees have to live in. Now, there's a Kurt Lewin formula that I talk about all the time, and that is behavior is a function of a person in an environment. And when we have to create an environment, if you think about when was the first time we experienced an environment, it was in the womb. And that we never get over that. That is something, when we are born to parents who create that environment. When we go into schools, we are in a classroom where the teachers create an environment. Now, during that time, we develop beliefs and values and attitudes and all of those things we have to deal with when we go into companies. So when we go into companies, we have in an environment that a leader is provided. Now, somebody I think mentioned in the chat KPIs. Was that right, Gary? Yeah. Now the key
Yes.
performance indicators. This is part of the competency framework, and KPIs represent the quantitative aspect of what we have to achieve. But many people, what I notice many people doing is they only measure KPIs. But and that is important. We have to measure that. But what is driving it? What is driving it is actually the competencies, the core competencies. How are people behaving? What are they demonstrating? What are we observing so that they could drive those KPIs? And coming back to KPIs, they are both leading and lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are things like the sales revenue or what the outputs will be. The leading indicators are the inputs. For example, in a sales company, how many clients are people seeing? What kinds of activities are they doing? Do they have to visit different countries? How often are they doing that? What types of these are input. All of these things I'm talking about here, inputs that drive the outputs. And this is, I think somebody mentioned continuous improvement here. Yes, that is what drives the culture. Because within a competency framework, one of the parts of that is that we have developmental areas. Wherever you are falling back on in terms of the competencies or the KPIs, we have developmental areas. So the developmental areas, we have to continue to develop people in that area, whatever area they may have fallen down in. So the continuous improvement is very important. And that is something that we always have to think about. Because what we are trying to do is maintain the types of culture that we have defined for our company. Now, remember, culture is a competitive differentiator, right? Two companies might be competing with the same kind of service, same kind of products, but one of them is going to deliver a better experience. And what creates the better experience? What creates the better experience is what are customers experiencing. But customers look for three things. They don't only look for the product and service. They also look for the types of people they have to work with, and they also look for the processes that they have to go through in order to use your product, to use your service. All of these things are important to drive the competitive advantage. So now, what is the output of a company? The output is what are the financial achievers that we have to look for? What are those financials? Everything that you were talking about, Gary, is all about what type of leadership behaviors do we have? Are we thinking ahead? Are we looking for continuous improvement? So we have to look at these things. And one of the things and let me close with this. There are several types of conversations that leaders have to have. And one of them is the expectations conversation. Do employees have clarity in what they have to achieve going forward? How often are we doing performance conversations? How often is it going to happen? Is it going to happen once a year? Is it going to happen every quarter? Now, companies are moving away from the once a year performance appraisals because they realize that there needs to be continuous conversations that happen throughout the year so that at the end of the first quarter, people know exactly what they have to improve on. There are also well-being conversations. Are leaders giving feedback, positive and negative feedback? Are they coaching the employees to develop them into what they want to see demonstrated? Skills, knowledge, behaviors, all of these things are important in driving culture and driving competitive advantage. That makes sense, Gary?
Makes a lot of sense, Tony. A whole lot of sense. Now, I'm seeing that we have some other questions in the chat, so I'm going to attempt to respond to some of the question. I see Ariella, she would have tabled a question, and that is strategic planning and execution are where leaders shine. What tools or framework do you recommend for effective strategic planning? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring you back to management framework. There are multiple ways in which I can go about answering the question. I can answer it from a management standpoint, a project management standpoint, or I can answer this question from a marketing standpoint. But let me begin this to attempt to answer your question from a management standpoint. In starting a business and wanting to attempt to position that business to be successful, it begins by you, first of all, setting objective and planning. And setting objective and planning is a very deep management responsibility. Here is where you have to do the think tanking and the brainstorming to really totally understand the mechanics behind the business process that you're about to get into. So you have setting objective and planning. The other element that is so important to look at is what we call organizing resources to achieve the objective. Now, in terms of business, when we talk about organizing resources to achieve the business objective, there's three particular things that we are looking at. We are looking at the human resources. Are you able to identify the critical human resources to move the vision forward? Because if the identification of the essential human resources to move that vision forward is not in your focus as part of your strategy, it can undermine the vision that you have in mind. To move a business forward is not just about selecting human resources. It's about identifying and selecting essential human resources to move that vision forward. You may have to go through process of the selection, recruitment, the placement, the acclimatization. So all of these things are things that needs to be looked at. There are cases where you might be bringing in professional to the organization, so you might be excused of that. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to go through this fast. The other strategic planning must be centered around capital resources, because as I was saying early on, very often someone starts a business, but then you don't have any strategy in terms of capital management. So in starting a business, it's important to recognize that there's a cost to do business. You have the administrative cost and you have the operational cost. And it's important for you to understand the cost of doing business. So part of your strategic planning should take you into that door where you are getting a much better, clearer vision in terms of what it means to organize resources to achieve the goal. So we look at setting objective and planning and organizing the resources to achieve the goal. This is organizing human, technical, and capital resources. The next step that we're going to be looking at here is that once you have organized this, there's another concept that we call communicating with and motivating your team. And here is where Tony's expertise comes into this very handily, because the way in which you're communicating information can be a predeterminant in terms of whether you're going to have a highly motivated workforce or a demotivated workforce. And a down-regulated workforce is not going to give you the results that you want. So what are the systems that you have in place to ensure that you have a highly motivated workforce that is really prepared to help you move your vision forward? So communicating with and motivating your team, you should have a master plan, you should have a game plan, you should have a blueprint here that's really helping you to identify your team players and identify what are those motivational factors that you can deploy. First of all, incorporate as part of the culture of the organization, deployed within the organization, so as to ensure that you have a highly motivated workforce. So all of these things are strategy. There's no one strategy. There are multiple moving parts to really move that vision forward. Now, as you set all of this up, there's what we also call coordinating activities. All right. To manage your business well, you need to also coordinate activities. And let me give an example of this. So you have the production department, and the production department now produces. But the production department has to now coordinate with the value chain and the distribution department. If there's no coordination here, the possibility exists that production does well, but there's a gap between production delivery and reaching customer expectation, because if the products are not shipped from the factory to the shelves or shipped from the factory to the ideal client, you have a gap here. If you don't have proper coordination here, it can undermine the very objective that you're going to attain in business. And the last element that I'm going to share with you here is what we call measuring and controlling performance towards attaining the objective. You see, as you set goals, sometimes the goals that you're setting to move your business ideas forward becomes a runaway train. And why does that happen? It happens because you're not measuring performance. And here's where some of the KPIs may come into place that Tony was talking about earlier. You don't have key performance indicators. And because of this, you are not monitoring, you're not evaluating, you're not controlling processes towards attaining the objective that you are supposed to be attaining with your business. So you get a runaway train. So that's just a little bit that I want to share based on the question that was tabled. I want to now turn over back to Tony for him to give his thoughts on what we have discussed so far. Tony?
Right. So thanks, Gary. I think what Aurelia was asking about was particularly frameworks in terms of strategic planning and processes.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we have to always think about in business is creating clarity for everybody. So when I spoke about KPIs earlier, about the leading and lagging KPIs for individuals, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. That filters down from the balanced scorecard. As a company, we need to create a balanced scorecard. So this is one of the frameworks that companies need to have. And that is broken down into your financial goals. And under that is the client satisfaction goals, like employee surveys, customer surveys, etc. What kinds of results you're getting on that? Internal processes, how is technology being used? Are the processes working well to drive that customer satisfaction and to drive the financials? And right at the bottom of that table is the learning and growth. What are we doing for individuals, which is what I spoke about earlier. So out of that balanced scorecard, you have a whole bunch of activities that you have to measure. Not activities, but metrics that you have to measure. But the bigger picture must come from your SWOT matrix. And there's something, everybody knows what the SWOT matrix is: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But out of the SWOT comes something called a TOWS matrix, which is SWOT spelled backwards. It takes the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats and puts it in a matrix so that you could combine strengths and opportunities here and put a list of actions in here that will use the strengths to take advantage of the opportunities. And that is what will give you actions in each quadrant. So in this quadrant over here, you may have weaknesses and opportunities. What actions do we need to take to strengthen our weaknesses to take advantage of the opportunities? There's a great example. If you Google the TOWS matrix, I think one of them that will come up is the Starbucks, sort of a minimized version, I imagine. I don't think they would put their whole strategic plan on the internet. But the idea, it gives you a good example of what you have to think about. So out of that TOWS matrix comes a whole series of actions that you now have to break down in terms of deadlines, responsibilities, and break it down into what parts. What are you going to do first, second, third, fourth? It's a fairly long process, but it's worth it. It's worth it to do that. And that is what some of the frameworks and processes that will help leaders to create clarity for the employees. Okay, that is it in a nutshell. Those are just two of the frameworks apart from the competency framework that we talk about for employees. Everything is connected, because everything that we are talking about is connected to your vision and mission and everything that you have to do as a company. Everything fits together to create the kind of culture that you want. But also everything is measured.
Yeah, great share, Tony. I want to say this to many rising stars in business. I know a lot of what we're saying here may sound complex, but guess what? You don't have to do this on your own. one of the strategies that you want to focus on in starting a business is to look at your organization chart, and you would recognize that any strong organization chart is built out to achieve three major objectives. One, you will have your strategic team. Two, you will have your tactical team. And three, you will have the operational team. As a rising star in business, one of the mistakes that you do, you think that you have to do everything. That's a recipe for disaster. Now, you want to identify the 20% of the task, and this is a major strategy, 20% of that business ecosystem that you're going to focus on, and you need to understand the power of delegation. Now, when you understand the organization chart, is what really allows you to do that. All right. So in building a business, you don't have to be public relation manager. You don't have to be the HR manager. You don't have to be the finance, the CFOs. You can identify key areas. I'm saying this largely based on the fact that because you are now able to appoint strategic leaders to the organization, the heavy lifting, you don't have to do all of this. And I'm saying this because every day I'm interfacing with rising stars in business from across the world. And one of the things that they keep talking about is burnout. And I ever so often have to say, you're feeling burnout because you don't have the right processes, you don't have the right systems. But with the right leadership, the right processes, the right systems, you are now setting yourself up to avoid burnout long before it happens. So I just want to point that out. Again, I can see that we have over 220 persons who are looking at our program today. I want to thank you for the depths of my heart for coming out and supporting this program. Do remember to like, subscribe, and share, so you will be the first to get these content that we are bringing to you on a regular basis. So, Tony, I'm going to turn back to you. And in another 5-10 minutes, we're going to start to wrap up. But all to you, Tony. What are your thoughts so far on what we've shared?
Yeah, everything has to make sense because everything is connected. Nothing, again, I'll say this again. I keep saying this. I say this a lot, actually, is that nothing within performance management exists in a vacuum. Everything is connected. From the competencies, core values, the people we hire, everything is connected to that big picture view. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier is I just want to touch on these two things that you mentioned earlier. One of them is having the organizational chart. I worked for a company recently that had a very flat organizational chart for a large number of people. It would say 100 on the very low level merchandisers in a local distributor, and they were all reporting to one supervisor. Now that is a recipe for disaster. There is no one leader who can manage 100 people and try to develop them and measure performance. It will take too long. What has to happen is that out of that 100, we need to have about 10 leaders who could drive 10 each within that. Because you mentioned burnout. These are the kinds of things that cause burnout. This and our ability to interact and to communicate with the people around us. And recently, there's another example. Something that happened to me recently is about 2 weeks ago, I went into this company and we were specifically dealing with communication styles. We were specifically dealing with teamwork. And there are two tools that I really love to use when we have teamwork sessions. One of them is the Big Five, which is something highly used, regularly used in psychology, highly respected as well. The Big Five is 5 personality traits that there's a questionnaire that tells us exactly where we stand, and our result. There's I believe a free version on truity.com. That is truity.com. You could get a free version there. But the Big Five personality types are openness. That is how, and we get a score out of 100 for each of these parameters. So openness is one of them. Conscientiousness is a lot of them. Another one. Extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, for instance, when I did the test, I scored high on conscientiousness, which means I'm very organized. I want to get work done. But I also scored high on agreeableness. But it means that I tend to be agreeable with people. I like to protect relationships. And that in itself is a source of stress. Because we have to, and what I realized about myself early on is that I had to develop my level of assertiveness. Now, this is just one tool. The other one I use is something called the Platinum Rule, which is a very simple communication style survey. But what happened recently coming back to the company I work for, the leader who was supposed to be in the training session at the last minute said that she couldn't make it. And I ended up with all of her direct reports. It turned out on their communication style surveys, they were all relationship-oriented types of personalities. You know, you have the relationship-oriented personalities, and then you have the task-focused personalities. Now, it's not that the relationship-oriented personalities are different from the task-focused personalities, but all of them are relationship-oriented personalities. And the leader who couldn't make it that day is the task focus. So what what is happening in the company is that they are afraid of speaking up. They are afraid of saying what they really feel. And because she was not there that day, everybody spoke up. Everybody had a lot to say. And when I spoke to her again, I said, this is something that I had to give her feedback on that, because this is something that needs to change. You want to have an element of psychological safety within the team, because without psychological safety, it means that you as a leader, you are not going to find out the information that you need to find out. You have to get this information from them. And you really need to understand how people are different, and understanding that, for me, for instance, I am an amiable type personality. So I tend not to like dominant style personalities, which is where I had most of my conflict in the work environment. It doesn't mean that there was no solution. There is a solution. It's just that leaders and employees or direct reports, they have to meet halfway in terms of how are we going to adapt to each other? How are we going to communicate? Have we spoken about that? We need to talk about these things. We need to have the conversations that drive performance. That is why relationships fall apart in the workplace, because we don't have the conversations that we need to have. And that is, when that is missing, it creates a lot of problems for everybody. And it affects the culture of the organization. And when it affects the culture of the organization, it means that your end product is going to suffer. Because people are not going to be working. People are not going to be working according to their expectations. And that happens all the time.
Tony, you have made a very great point. So because of the leadership style, instead of creating the environment where the workforce felt comfortable to express themselves, they all were shut up. They all were shut down. It took you and someone else to come into the organization to get them to open up. And what I learned very often, it is only by getting the staff to really open up that really helps you to understand the impact that existing culture is having on them. And the only way to effectively change it and to get buy-in, full buy-in, is when you get them to really open up about that concept. So I would want to say that perhaps her leadership style was not as effective as perhaps she thought it was. As time progressed, we will talk about autocratic, democratic, and leadership style, and the strengths and weaknesses of each of them. And in today's modern economy, what perhaps are the best practices to deploy in that regard. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think her leadership style was good?
Say that again, Gary. I didn't understand the question.
Reflecting on what you said.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I just got you. Her leadership style is very autocratic, but it's important. It's not that something is wrong with the autocratic style. It is just that autocratic styles tend to come across as very dominant and controlling, and there are some personality styles that don't work well with that. So there needs to be
I
a
agree.
level of adaptability. For me as a leader, if I know I'm dealing with, say, somebody who is analytical, for instance, an analytical personality, on the DISC, there's the DISC communication style survey. The analytical is the I, the C. If I know I'm dealing with somebody like that, I am going to be more detailed in the way I come across. I could automatically change that about myself. It's not that I'm trying to be a chameleon and change my personality, but I'm going to automatically give more details to that type of person. If I'm dealing with the dominant style, I'm going to deliver my message in a way that is more bottom line, because they tend not to like too many details. And with the influence personalities and the steady personalities, and I'm just referring to DISC now, the DISC personality profile. And the S people are very relationship oriented. I would probably approach them in that way. But it's not, you see, once we get in the habit of doing these things, it doesn't become work. It's work for people who have never adapted to other people. Yes, all of us want to be authentic. We want to be ourselves. That is important within the workplace. And we should feel that we could be ourselves. But if being yourself is being disrespectful, then that is not authenticity. At least not by my definition of it. So that is my 2 cents on that. But we have to adapt. We have to adapt to people. That makes a difference within creating the within the environment.
Great share, Tony. I'm going to make a statement here, and then we're going to start to give up our wrap-up remarks. Now, in starting the program, I outlined 3 essential concepts that one needs to understand when you want to start and scale a business and position yourself to build wealth. And I'm going to repeat them again. To be wealthy begins by first having a rich state of mind. And what does it mean to have a rich state of mind? One, a rich state of mind is influenced by leadership, processes, and system. And that's some of what we discussed today. Of course, we do a high level of view. And with the time allotted to us, we are not really able to go deep into them. But I'm certain that you had some information to take away from today's program. Secondly, we talk about the fact that a rich state of mind is also influenced by science and proven theory and best practices. I didn't spend much time looking at this one, so I'm going to spend just a little time now to look at this. In starting and scaling a business and positioning yourself to build wealth, it's important for you to ask yourself, what is the data saying? What are the scientific facts that are showing? Now, it's important to approach business. It is important to approach wealth creation by asking yourself, what is the data showing? What is the science saying? The science is what enables you to get high reward. The science is what enables you to get, measurable results. The science is what enables you to get predictable outcome with the highest degree of accuracy. Now, what I'm saying to you is that in starting a scale in a business, when you have the right information, because you're using the scientific approach, you're using the data analytics approach, it really sets you up to journey along a path that can really set you up to drive that business to be more successful. So as time progresses, we will go deeper into what the science of wealth creation looks like, what the science of business success looks like. So you have a blueprint, you have a step-by-step approach that you can now adopt to the organization to move your business forward. Now, I'm saying all of this because we see many rising stars in business. You start and you fail, all right? Research again is showing that over 80% of business startup fail by the time you reach 10 years. You don't survive to reach 10 years. 80% of businesses fail. Now, why those businesses are failing? You're failing because you don't have the right leadership style. You're failing because you don't have the right processes. You're failing because you don't have the right systems. You're failing because you don't have the data. You're failing because you don't know how to access capital. All of these things are things that we have researched and they're well documented. We're talking about these things because we want you to be successful. And let me say this. Once you're in the US and you need access to capital to grow and scale your business, you can be in 50 states. We can help you access the much needed capital to grow and scale your business. All you need to do is two things. One, you can contact us, and in the description, I'm going to put a link. You can go to that link and you can follow that form, and we will take you straight to our team where you will be able to get the support that you need to grow your business. Again, in the event that you need information on market access, you need support to access the market, we're also able to help you with that. And I'm quite certain that my colleague, when it comes to helping you to adopt a more emotional, intelligent way to manage your business, he is an expert in this field. He is also an expert in performance management. And performance management is so important because performance management really helps you to set clear goals and clear objectives that you want to accomplish. And now, because you have set those clear goals, you now need to organize the resources, human, technical, and capital resources, to move you closer and closer towards attaining the goals that you have set yourself. And I know Tony's an expert in this field, and he will talk about it some more. And again, we're highlighting some of the challenges, we're highlighting a whole lot of the solution, and now we're saying to you, in the event that you need the support, that technical input to move your vision, your business to that next level of development, we would be so happy to give you the intervention that you need. Tony, all to you and your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's important that we always focus on clarity. Clarity is a strong motivator in any environment. When people are clear on what they have to achieve and they are in an environment that is healthy. No, not every environment is for everyone. That is why we have to define the sort of behaviors that we need to define, so that when we bring people in, we bring people in who have those behaviors, who have those skills, who have the knowledge that we are looking for. So once you have that, then it means that as leaders, we have less work to do trying to develop somebody into that. And that is where the alignment comes in. We have to align with what are the goals of the company, and we have to pay attention to that. And again, having emotional intelligence on your side is going to propel you forward, not only as a leader, but as any employee within any company. Because emotional intelligence is not just important for your professional life, it's important for your personal life as well. So everything I do, I always approach it from both the personal and professional perspective. And that is important to understand. All right. And thanks. I want to just say a special thank you for everybody who is listening. Thanks for your comments. And thank you again, Gary, for having me on.
You're most welcome, my friend. And again, I want to say a big shout out to the listening audience from across the world. Today, we are reaching over 50 countries. And today we had live with us over 220 persons were here live with us. We want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And all of those who have contributed to the chat by asking questions and making your contribution, we want to thank you for supporting this program. Remember, like, subscribe, and share so you will be the first to get these content that we are bringing to you on a regular basis. Tony, thanks. And I want to thank the team who's working behind the scene to make this happen. A big shout out to you. A big shout out to you for the great work that you're doing behind the scene to move this process forward. Tony, with that, I want to say thanks again. And remember, Tony is an expert in performance management. He's an expert in emotional intelligence. And in the event that you need his skill set to help move your business processes forward, do reach out, and you will definitely be in contact with him. With that being said, we'll do this again next week, Saturday. So goodbye and see you guys next week, Saturday.